because everything that we talk about has to go back to the consumer. So I'm really excited to welcome to the screen. She's a skilled researcher, Trendspotter, and storyteller. She's the founder of Inlay Insights. And for a lot of you that have been to RetailSpaces Live, and even some of our partners, our wonderful partners who've been to other events, you've probably seen her on stage at an event of ours. Here she is joining us for the first time virtually at RetailSpaces. Let's welcome Kim Lear. Kim, how you doing today?
Hi. I'm good. Thanks for having me. Hi, everyone.
Hey, I have to get used to like turning left to right because you got to get used to the different cameras here. But nice to see you, Kim. Where are you coming? Where are you coming to us from today? Minneapolis.
I'm in Minneapolis.
Minneapolis. Nice. Well, Kim, before we jump into some of the questions that I have for you here, do you want to just give the audience just a little bit of background about yourself?
Yeah, absolutely. I'm sure some of you may have seen me present before. And so my background is in demography and sociology. I study shifting demographics, consumer trends, workplace patterns, really focused on this topic of generations. And so I look at these events and conditions that shape people's formative years and try to understand the lasting impacts that has on society. And so, of course, right now we are in the midst of many events and conditions that are shaping the formative years of a new generation as they step into their own in the world. And so since March 13th, my research has obviously primarily been focused on COVID. I've conducted over 150 one-on-one interviews with people of all generations, all 50 states, all walks of life, and it's essentially a time capsule of a pandemic, trying to understand how people are spending their day-to-day lives, how they're feeling, what they're worried about, what are surprising silver linings, and everything is recorded so that we can really have this capsule, this moment to try to understand how people behave in the backdrop of some catastrophe.
Great. So, I guess of course, I want to dive into your research here, but I want to kick off on a positive note. What are you hearing in these interviews that you've been doing that makes you hopeful about the future? I feel like we get bogged down in the COVID's change us forever mentality, which, I'm going to ask you about that. But what makes you hopeful coming out of your research, in your research?
In the early days of the pandemic, there was a lot of conversation around this awakening to this appreciation for simplicity. And there were conversations being had, there were essays being written about how, as long as I have my health and the health and safety of my family, that's all I really need. And of course, just because of Maslow's hierarchy, if you are unsafe, if your family is unsafe, if you're ill, you can't really reach towards something more than that. But I think rolling into the 8th month of this pandemic, what we're actually seeing are the limitations of that, the limitations of the nuclear family, some of the limitations of simplicity. And that, to me, actually makes me very hopeful because we miss each other. I think instead of this awakening to appreciation for simplicity, I think on the flip side, what we're actually seeing is this resurgence of appreciation for communal life. And in all of the interviews, I ask people, let's say a vaccine comes out tomorrow and we all take it, we're in the clear, COVID is behind us. What is the first thing you want to go do? And people want to go to ball games and they want to go to concerts. They want to go to their religious services. They want to go to a crowded bar and get a drink spilled on them. They want to go dancing. They want to go to a coffee shop and read the newspaper. We miss each other. And to me, that is so deeply hopeful. I think that if going into 8 months of this, if people were telling me, yeah, I really don't need anything outside the 4 walls of my house, that would be a devastating realization. And so this is one of the things that makes me hopeful about the possibility of almost a renaissance creatively from a community standpoint when this is all over. Of course, a lot of this is going to depend on what type of recovery we have from an economic standpoint coming out of this, but that's something we can talk about another time if you'd like. But I think at the core, what makes me hopeful is this primitive nature of ours that has been tapped into during this time. We are clans people, we are tribes people, and I think we feel that more than ever now based on the things that we miss.
Great. So I guess, with that, what are some of the biggest retail trends you think we'll see coming out of this?
There are three that really come to mind, but of course there's a lot of ways that this could go. The first one I would say is that we are witnessing a lot of tech fatigue, particularly from the younger generations. And I think we're hearing a lot about this already in higher ed. But in terms of how that impacts retail, what people are looking for in their physical environments out of this, I believe, is going to be something dramatically different than what they had out of their virtual experiences. So of course, there's still, people want things to be convenient, people want things to be friction-free, but because we have this hunger for connection that is so acute right now, I think going back into the physical environment, retail included, people are looking for these forms of connection. And in terms of the physical space, I think the best physical spaces are going to be the ones that facilitate this human-to-human interaction. And I've always thought that retail is such a uniquely special place for that. I started working in retail when I was 16 years old. I worked in the jewelry department of what was then called Marshall Fields. And in college, I worked at Saks Fifth Avenue in Boston. And there are always these moments for any of you who have actually worked on the floor in a retail environment, some of that innate intimacy that can exist. I would work with men who were begging their wives for forgiveness and trying to find the perfect gift for them. And those were always my highest commission checks. Or you're working with brides, or you're working with people who have to buy something to wear to a funeral, whatever that is. But I think that refocus on the frontline sales associate to be able to connect with people, to communicate with people, to fulfill that need for people will be something that coming out of this, the consumer will be hungry for. So that's one. Another one is just this rededication to local commerce. And I think, particularly in these tier 2 and tier 3 cities, we see this even stronger. So for any of you who are calling in from Minneapolis, where I am, from Columbus, from Nashville, there was just this incredible momentum for these local commerce ecosystems. And communities felt so much pride in these places. And with every small business that is going under right now, it re-ups the dedication that the community is feeling. There's a sadness with each one that goes under. And so I do think that coming out of this, for the local businesses that can make it, they will have an unbelievable support system from their communities. For the local businesses that emerge after this, I think communities will really go out of their way to make sure that those companies can make it. And even here in Minneapolis, it was only a couple years ago when the Wall Street Journal wrote that piece about Martin Patrick, which is it's a phenomenal retailer here in Minneapolis. And our community here, we're basically doing whatever it takes to keep places like Danilo and Martin Patrick open so that after this, we can go back to these places. And then the third thing is just this rise of conscious capitalism. And conscious capitalism is something that has been talked about now for a long time, especially 15 years ago, as millennials were starting to gain more and more control over consumer spending. But what we ended up finding with millennials was that their purchasing behavior remained convenience and cost-based more than conscious-based. I think with Gen Z, it is going to be very different. And it's not just because of this exact moment. I remember 5 years ago when I started conducting the interviews on college campuses in greater numbers, and the way that young people were talking about capitalism, their awareness of it was at the time really shocking to me. But they grew up, their formative years are post the recession, and it wasn't really until Occupy Wall Street when capitalism, the 99%, the 1%, when that really became part of it. And this, and they seem to have a very precise understanding that the best way to have your voice heard is to be merciless in where you put your money.
Great insights, Kim. So one thing I want to do reference, and we said it in the open, is in the chat function. You can throw any questions that you have in there. We are looking at that. So if you do have questions or comments that you like to bring up, if you agree or disagree with something, of course, go. That's the place to let your voice be heard. But we only have another minute left here, Kim. I guess my question is the one that kind of when people are registering, we ask everybody, "What's your biggest challenge? What are you trying to solve right now?" And one of the most common things we're seeing, of course, is understanding, again, where the customer is going. And has COVID really changed the customer forever? So some of the conversation we'll be discussing are, some of our design trends. Are we designing things for temporarily? Or is this something, is our behaviors changed so much that this is how things could change, for the next decade and beyond? So short question, has COVID changed consumers forever?
I don't know. I wish I knew it. I mean, I think a lot of it is going to depend on what this recovery looks like. They're saying it might be a K-shaped recovery. That's going to have big impacts. But something that I'm sure that all of you have heard a million times over is that in some ways COVID is really serving as this great accelerator. The trends we were already seeing in retail are now being accelerated. People want to buy less things and they want those purchases to be more meaningful. People are willing to leave their couch and get out behind their phone in order to have better experiences, more meaningful experiences. And I think that trends like that are just going to accelerate after COVID.
Well, Kim, I know we wish we had more time here with you, and hopefully by this time next year, you'll be joining us on a stage live for one of your awesome hour-long talks where everybody walks away going, "I need to watch that 5 more times," because there was so much great insights in there. But with that being said, for people that want to learn more about you, about your research, and also to subscribe to your awesome newsletter, as I told you earlier, I share that with so many people. They can go to your website, which is inlayinsights.com, correct?
That's it.
I think we can on the screen. There's Kim. So if you go to that website, I don't know if you could read it up in the top there, but it's inlayinsights.com. And of course, you can learn about her research and subscribe to her newsletter, or maybe even bring Kim to speak at your organization. She does a bang-up job. So thank you so much, Kim, and be well and safe, and see you again soon.
Thank you. Thanks, everyone. Have a good rest of the conference.